following comes from the American Patriot, a weekly publication in Bellefonte, Centre County, Pennsylvania, and it's dated August 18th, 1817. Now, normally Bond would read a little bit about the title of the article and the publication date and what periodical it came from in our past periodical series, but there's a bit more context needed here, and I figured it'd just be easier if I went in it. Now, this publication, the American Patriot, proclaims to be published by Alexander Hamilton. Now, is this the Alexander Hamilton or just another person with the same name? It's not a super uncommon name. And the Alexander Hamilton that we think of, which you may now more associate with the musical than anything else, is dead by this point, 1817, famously having been shot in a duel. Now, the interesting thing, and what many people may have forgotten, and I certainly wasn't aware to the full extent, was his squabbles, that being Alexander Hamilton's, with Thomas Jefferson. And this newspaper, although it claims to be published by Alexander Hamilton, it probably is more of a legacy of his thoughts, because this paper is very much against Jeffersonian democracy and Jefferson's Republican or Democratic Republican Party, which he had founded. Now, further interesting about this is this specific article is essentially just a screed against Joseph Heister, who was the fifth governor of Pennsylvania from 1820 to 1823. And he was just a really interesting character. He worked in a shop. He had been a clerk in a store that his wife's father had run out of Reading. He was born in Berks County. He fought in the American Revolution, including at the battles of Long Island and Germantown. He was a member of the group who drafted the Articles of Confederacy and was a ratifier of the U.S. Constitution. At the time of this writing, he had already been a member of both the Pennsylvania House of Representatives and the Senate, and had served in public office from 1787 until 1823, when he retired from public life, with only a few years in the range where he was not serving public office. Now, he would lose this race against William Findley, the governor at the time of the article. He would lose the race in 1817, but would narrowly win in 1820. One of the interesting things about Heister is he was known as the Old German Gray, and he spoke with a Pennsylvania Dutch accent, or more accurately, Pennsylvania Deutsch accent. Let me go into this a little bit. It's important to remember that there wasn't really a unified Germany. There wasn't a Germany in the way that we think of it until 1871, much later than I think we'd be inclined to believe. And in fact, at the time of this article, 1817, the German Confederation had only lasted for about 2 years, again, it being founded around 1815. So it's just a very interesting time. Most people who spoke the German language were known as the Deutsch. It was just a kind of catch-all term. And so when you hear people refer to the Amish as Pennsylvania Dutch, there's no real confusion that the Amish came from Holland or something like that. Again, the Amish came here prior to Germany being a unified country, or even prior to the German Confederation being in existence. And so they fall into that catch-all phrase of Deutsch. Again, a term for anybody who spoke the German or a Teutonic language. In fact, later in this paper, there is the accusation or a defense of William Findley's son, who apparently stated that his father, in a drunken moment, didn't need any Deutsch votes, and he could get plenty of American votes. So it's pretty interesting how these ethnic lines were portrayed back then, with even the German-speaking Pennsylvanians not really being considered Americans despite their vast number here in the Commonwealth. So again, Joseph Heister, who would become the fifth governor of Pennsylvania, This is very much a paper against his party of Democratic Republicans and pro William Findley, governor at the time. Let's go into it. Again, this comes from the American Patriot, August 18th, 1817. The disinterested patriot Joseph Heister has found the traffic in politics during a long succession of years perhaps more profitable than any other man in the United States. The reason why he seceded from the Democratic Party in 1805 and joined the Federalists is perhaps not so well known as it ought to be. In 1804, he published an address in which he said, "Fellow citizens, a union with Federalists I cannot in the least approve." And 1 year afterwards, we find him ringleader of the Federalists in their cuckoo cries of "Save the Constitution." He proclaimed to the state that if Simon Snyder were elected governor, the Constitution would be demolished and an equal distribution of property made, and confusion and anarchy would ensue. His supposed disinterestedness gave weight to his declarations, but the election of McKean soon removed the veil and his love of office and self became manifest. His son was appointed Prothonotary of Berks County. His son-in-law was made president of the courts. He himself was made a major general by McKean, not on account of military, but of political services in 1805. He was also appointed one of the 3 commissioners to certain claims by the state against John Nicholson. For this service, in which he was engaged for about 4 weeks, he received $3,333. This was the price of reward for his disinterested exertion in promoting McKean's election. This sum was more than $3,000 beyond any equivalent for his services, yet how much was put into the treasury of Berks or any other county? The editor of the Aurora has been the author, or rather inventor, of more political nicknames than any other public journalist in the Union. It was he who first began the odious appellation of the Quades. He has now his old school and new school Democrats, which again grace the Cossacks, neutrals, treasurymen, and last of all, squatters. Now, this last term, squatters, it appears that Mr. Duane and his friend Lieb, that paragon of honesty and patriotism, mean that class of citizen known in this part of the state by the appellation of actual settlers, that is, persons who have settled on the lands north and west of the Ohio and Allegheny Rivers and the Conowongo Creek under the Act of State Legislature passed in 1792. A contest has taken place and has been kept up for several years past between this class of people and another class who are denominated warrant holders, alias land monopolizers or speculators. These contests, however, are settling every day in due course of law to the satisfaction of all parties. But the restless spirit of the Aurora must meddle with everything, and without waiting for the word, as us soldiers say, from Mercury or some other patriotic conjunctor, the cause of Quaidism and federalism. Out he comes with his attack of the squatters in his paper on the 30th of June, in which he has displayed as much malignity as is possible for a man to display in such a small compass. He says, "The squatters seize upon other men's lands. The squatters denounce every man as an enemy and menace them with vengeance if they attempt to gain possession of their own lands. The squatters say the means are suited to the end." It is some consolation to the actual settlers, or squatters as Dr. Lieb and Mr. Duane denominate them, that none of them can be accused of either stealing the revolutionary certificates of orphan children or of running away from their militia camps during the late war. Whatever may be said of their stealing other men's lands, they have sense enough to know that they can hold no lands which they are not guaranteed to them by law, and they ask but for justice. It is a pity that the Mercury man would not publish this precious morceau from the Aurora, as his paper circulates generally among those thievish squatters who are so fond of stealing other men's lands. They might see, then, of what materials the Heisterites are composed, and be prepared to act accordingly, but that would not suit. This kind of slang was only intended for rich German farmers on the other side of the mountains, that class of people whom the patriotic Joseph Heister in 1805 induced to believe that the forged toast about equal distribution of property meant that the Democrats and Snyderites wanted to destroy the Constitution and divide all the large farms into small ones so that each man should have an equal share of land. This slang is not meant for the people of this side of the Allegheny Mountains who know too well their rights to be cajoled out of them by the mercenary and factious combination now opposed to the Republican cause under the denomination Independent Republicans, the alias for the Heisterites, or to be intimidated by the malignant abuse of the plunder of orphan children or the one-away adjutant general. These men, in one sense of the word, are deserving of the term independent, for which they have assumed. That is, they are independent of principle, and the actual settlers, or, if it pleases the junto, the squatters, will show them on the second Tuesday of October next that their unprincipled intrigues will have no weight with them, that they will remain true to the Republican cause and to the principles of the American Revolution. And here's a second article. It's actually a letter from a reader, or so it claims, responding to an article which appeared in the Independent Republican, which was a Heister supporting paper. In the Independent Republican of this morning, I find the following paragraph. A gentleman at a tavern in Harrisburg fell in with a young man who greatly annoyed every person within hearing with his swaggering and noise, swearing that Findlay did not care a damn for all the Dutch votes. He could get plenty of American votes, etc. Upon inquiry, the swaggerer was discovered to be Findlay's son. Well, I am acquainted with William Findlay's eldest son, William. I have lived his neighbor in Harrisburg for nearly 2 years. I marched with him as a volunteer to Baltimore in Captain Crane's company of artillerists in the fall of 1814. Was with him during the campaign nearly 4 months and came home with him. I knew him to be a sober, prudent, judicious, and unassuming young man, few of his age more so. I am certain he never did utter the words above laid to his charge, nor any words of the kind. I am also confident that no person who knows him will ever believe he did say so. And further, I am persuaded no gentleman, not other person of credit, will come forward in his proper person and say that he was present and heard him say so. I know he is neither a swaggerer nor swearer. I never heard him utter an oath to my certain knowledge during my acquaintance with him. On the contrary, his deportment was that of a gentleman in every particular. He is a young man of amiable manners, of brave, open-hearted, and friendly disposition, and was greatly esteemed by every man in the company. He slept in the same tent with myself and belonged to the same mess. I therefore had certainly a good opportunity of being well acquainted with him. I also know of Mr. Findlay's second son, Samuel. I know him to be quiet, measuring, modest boy, incapable of utterances or words or sentiments above stated or anything like them. Believing the above statement in the Independent Republican to be false, and not being ashamed to defend the innocent from unremitted abuse, I do not hesitate to describe my real name, Samuel Harris, Bellefonte, August 18, 1817.